Brittany Madison, and you're watching Dontaesboxingnation.
Okay, now blow.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
No worse.
All right, who is better, Benavidez or Charlo in your opinion?
Both fighters are great. Both fighters are great fighters. I can pick one because they are good fighters.
Jamal, do you think Canelo's move to 168 means that he don't want no smoke at 160?
He's scared. Where you at, Cinnamon? We've been calling you out for a long time. It's that time to show up. Show up. Get the people what they want to see. The people want to see us fight the best in the world. We feel like we the best in the world. Come on, man. All right, go to Mexico and fight Canelo at his house. Run it. Will we not fight Canelo at his house? Mexico. We will go to Mexico. We love Mexico. We from Texas, bro.
Well, shouldn't that fight happen in Cowboy
Stop
Stadium?
playing, bro. We want to go to Mexico. We love Mexico. We vacate to Mexico. We got a house in Mexico.
Dontaesboxingnation, what's going on, guys? So Canelo Alvarez just recently came out and he said that he's not going to fight against any Mexican fighters because he represents Mexico. But when Canelo said this, he did not get the reception he expected. He received a lot of backlash from that statement. And the majority of the backlash, it came from some of the greatest Mexican fighters of all time and some of the Mexican trainers. But believe it or not, this is not the first time Canelo Alvarez said this. The last time he said this was, I don't know, about a year or a couple of years ago, but it fell on deaf ears. No one was really talking about it. And I believe no one was talking about it at the time because that's before David Benavidez became his mandatory and started to make a name. You see, the reason Canelo Alvarez said it back then is because Gilberto Ramirez, he was calling out Canelo Alvarez. Now you fast forward to present day, Gilberto Ramirez is about to fight the guy that just beat Canelo Alvarez, which puts even more pressure on Canelo Alvarez to fight one of these dangerous Mexican fighters. David Benavidez, who's Canelo Alvarez's mandatory, or Gilberto Ramirez, assuming he beats Bivol. You know, I've been telling you guys for years the walls are closing in on Canelo Alvarez. Now, some of you guys will say, well, the walls have already closed on him because he just lost to Bivol. But things are about to get far worse for Canelo Alvarez. Trust me. Because the statement Canelo Alvarez just made alone about not fighting Mexicans, it puts him in a conundrum. Because now it's at the point to where it doesn't matter if you defend Canelo Alvarez's stance and say, I agree with him, or you oppose what he says. Regardless of where you stand, it's going to still put pressure on Canelo Alvarez to either fight the best Mexican fighters or fight the best black fighters. And we already know that Canelo Alvarez, he hasn't fought either in years. When Canelo Alvarez was the champion at 160, his mandatory was Jamal Charlo. Now Canelo Alvarez is the champion at 168, and his mandatory is David Benavidez. Now, just to further prove my point that Canelo Alvarez, he is screwed no matter which direction he goes. Robert Garcia, he just recently came out and he defended Canelo Alvarez's stance. Robert Garcia, he did an interview in Spanish, a recent interview in Spanish, where he basically said that, you know, there's no reason for the Mexicans to be beating up each other. Canelo should be fighting against the black fighters and the white fighters. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read the exact transcript. This is exactly what was said. So the reporter, he says, Robert, Canelo says he doesn't want to fight Mexicans. What do you think? Robert, he says he does good. Why do we want to see him batter with the Mexicans? Batter with the Mexicans, that means why do we want to see him beat up the Mexicans? Then he says, no, let him batter the Europeans and the Negros, right? Let him batter the Negros, the Gambachos and Europeans. Gambachos is another word for gringos, white fighters. So Robert Garcia says this, and you can clearly tell that what Robert just said really took the reporter by surprise, because he responds by saying, Robert, then David Benavidez and Zurdo Ramirez are left without a fight with Canelo? Now, by the way, the reporter, he forgot to ask the most important question, which is, so Robert, are you advising Canelo Alvarez to vacate his belt rather than fight his mandatory David Benavidez because he's Mexican? Now, he didn't ask that question, and no one that has been around Canelo asking him questions has asked him this. And it's because they don't want to ask Canelo Alvarez real questions that will put more pressure on him. but one of them might do it now after this video. Going back to the transcript. So after the reporter asked Robert Garcia, once again, what about Ramirez and Benavidez? So they're left without a Canelo Alvarez fight, and Robert Garcia, he simply says, let them fight against each other, completely contradicting what he had just said at the beginning of this conversation. Robert Garcia had just said, why do we want to see us batter each other? But when it comes to the two guys that want to fight Canelo Alvarez that happen to be Mexican, now he says, let them fight against each other. This is amazing to me, how some people are desperately clinging on to this sinking Canelo Alvarez ship. Despite the fact that there are Mexican fighters more talented than Canelo Alvarez, more versatile than Canelo Alvarez, which is David Benavidez. Now, we're going to get deeper into that in a second, but first I want to go back to what Robert Garcia just said and his many contradictions. Now listen, even though a lot of people wouldn't agree with what Robert Garcia just said right there, but if he wouldn't have contradicted himself, it wouldn't have sounded as bad. Him saying, let Ramirez and Benavidez fight against each other, that means even he doesn't care if Mexicans are fighting against each other. He only cares about the protection of Canelo Alvarez. That's what he just admitted right there. Something else you need to pay attention to. If Robert Garcia says, you know what, why should we fight against each other? You know, fight against the black fighters, fight against the white fighters. If you're going to say something like that, why wouldn't you say Canelo needs to fight Jamal Charlo? Forget about the Mexican fighters. We need to see him fight against Jamal Charlo because we don't want to see Mexicans beating up on Mexicans, etc., etc. I want to see Canelo Alvarez fight Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade and Charlo, they have been calling him out for years. Why doesn't Canelo fight one of those guys? You see, Robert, he didn't say that because he's trying to have it both ways. He's really saying this is not about fighting other Mexicans. This is about Canelo Alvarez staying protected and not fighting anyone who will most likely end up beating him. You know, guys, I tell you all the time, when it comes to the greatest fighters of all time, from black, white, and everything in between, the vast majority of the greatest fighters of all time suffered either their very first loss or one of their first losses to a black boxer, from Muhammad Ali all the way down to Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. But when it comes to Mexican fighters in particular, at least 95% of the greatest Mexican fighters of all time suffered their first loss to a black boxer. And ironically enough, Robert Garcia, who was a really good fighter and a champion, by the way, he's not on that list of greatest Mexican fighters of all time, but he as well suffered his first loss to a black boxer by the name of Diego Corrales. You guys may remember Diego Corrales. He was pound for pound one of the best fighters, even ranked above Floyd Mayweather on the pound for pound list until Floyd Mayweather stopped him. Diego Corrales, he won the belt against the undefeated champion, Robert Garcia. And the reason why I bring this up is because, once again, if Robert Garcia, a Mexican fighter who also suffered his first defeat to a black fighter, and he knows the history of Mexican fighters losing to black boxers, why wouldn't Robert Garcia push hard for Canelo Alvarez to go in the ring and avenge some of those defeats? And the answer is simple, because Robert Garcia is not confident that Canelo Alvarez beats Jamal Charlo, beats Demetrius Andrade. And this is the only reason Robert Garcia would say that Canelo Alvarez, he should just stick to fighting the black fighters, the European fighters, the white fighters, but not mention Charlo's name, not mention Andrade's name, not mention the Bivol rematch. Because when it comes to Canelo Alvarez's skill set overall, when it comes to how good Robert Garcia believes Canelo Alvarez is, Robert, at the end of the day, knows what time it is. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, fever blisters, diabetic ulcers, this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called Elo Deki Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to elodeki.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram. Fellas, I've got some great news for you. If you've lost your hair or have a receding hairline, the time has come when you can finally get your hairline back through a process called scalp micropigmentation. So here's how it works. It's a hair tattoo that replicates the look of your hair follicles when you have fully shaved it down. So to get this hookup, make sure you follow and contact my man ScalpCarolinas on Instagram. Let me tell you guys about Issa Israel Law Firm. It is a full-service legal practice based in Denver, Colorado, an emerging hub for combat sports and high-altitude training. If you're a fighter inside or outside of the ring and you need a law firm you can trust to fight for you, visit thefighterfirm.com or email help@iilawfirm.com. Legal representation is usually limited to plaintiffs or defendants in Colorado, but iFirm can help anyone in the world with trademarking their business name, logos, and U.S. immigration issues. This brother has been my attorney for a while and helped guide me through all kinds of business and civil issues, so make sure you guys go to thefighterfirm.com.